Who are the best generals for reinforcing? That's what we're going to be talking about here. Hi, and welcome to Red Evony. I am Akayasha. You can call me Aka. So, our reinforcing saga continues. This time, we're going to be looking at which generals are the best generals to use for reinforcing. And we're going to break it down like this. We're going to split the generals into 3 different classes. So we have Class A, which is for when leading the army to attack generals. Then we have Class B, which is when leading the army generals. And we have Class C, which is wall generals. We're going to split the generals into these 3 different classes, and I'm going to give you my picks for the best general within each of those classes, and we're going to compare them. That way, you'll be able to make sure that you're sending the best reinforcing generals for your best reinforcing march. And you need to make sure that you're reinforcing your in-game spending with discounts. Enter Aptoid. See what I did there? Smooth, right? So guys, Aptoid is back and they have provided us codes for the weekend. If you use the code for the channel, Red Star, you'll be able to get additional discounts with your purchases. Of course, using the code helps out the channel, which is as always greatly appreciated. But I don't need to tell you guys that. You know I love you, right? So, use the code Red Star, help yourself out with some discounts, and help the channel out as well. Thank you very much, guys. Now, let's get back to the generals. Now, we're going to break this down by troop types. And the first troop type that we're going to be looking at are ranged troops. So, we're looking at ranged generals for reinforcing keeps. Now, this particular set of generals has a few surprises in it. And you'll see what I mean shortly. So, when we look at the Class A generals, which are when leading to attack generals, you might be thinking something like maybe the best generals in this class would be someone like Merlin or Marcus. If that's what you were thinking, then you'd be wrong. My pick for the best general in the when leading the army to attack class for reinforcing is Mihai. Yes, folks, when I looked at it, for the generals I compared, Mihai had the best stats for reinforcing keeps in this particular class. So we have Mihai here. For the next class, which is the Class B, when leading the army generals, this one is probably going to surprise you as well. For this class, you might be thinking generals like, I don't know, maybe Minamoto or perhaps Godfrey. No. The best general that I found in this when leading the army class for ranged generals is Louis IX. So we have him there. And then of course, for the Class C generals, wall generals, this one is a bit of a no-brainer. Zachary Taylor. In my estimate, he's the best ranged wall general in the game. So we have these 3 generals. Now, before I go ahead and show you their stats, let me use this opportunity to explain some of the key differences between these classes of generals. Now, you probably already know that when leading the army generals are considered better than when leading the army to attack generals. But the question now is, why? And the answer to that is not because of their main skill. Okay, their main skill is the indicator. But the real reason why when leading the army generals are better than when leading the army to attack generals is because of the qualification of the rest of their stats. Let me explain what I mean. We have Merlin here. And you look at his main skill, it's when leading to attack. So, automatically, his main skill will not apply when he's reinforcing keeps. Then, if we look at his specialties, so we look at this first one. These stats are what I call vanilla stats. Okay? They are not qualified. They are just regular range, attack, defense, HP stats. These will apply when he's reinforcing. We look at the second specialty. These ones will also apply when reinforcing. We look at the third one. These will all apply when reinforcing. Then we look at the fourth one. This one has marching and attacking stats. None of the stats in this specialty will apply when he's reinforcing a keep. So that's one key point. But then, beyond this, we look at his ascension. And if you look at the ascension, you don't even need to calculate the stats in there. Look at it and you can see marching, 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 marching. None of the stats in his ascension are going to apply when he's being sent to reinforce a keep. So, for Merlin, with all his stats, the only things that will apply are his first three specialties, as we saw. Okay, so that's for the when leading the army to attack generals. Now, we have someone like Edward III here. Okay, his main stat is when leading the army. So, he'll be a Class B general. Automatically, his main skill is going to apply when he's being sent to reinforce a keep. If we look at his specialties, this one will apply, this one will apply, this one will apply, and the fourth one will apply. All his specialties will apply. Then we look at his ascension. And as you can see from the ascension, all the stats in his ascension will apply when he's being sent to reinforce a keep. This is the real reason why when leading the army generals end up being better than when leading the army to attack generals. But of course, one other point to note is that when leading the army to attack generals tend to have better base stats than when leading the army generals. So that difference, they will cut into it a bit, but it is still not enough for them to overcome the buff difference. Okay, now, when it comes to wall generals, they will have in-city stats and they tend to have decent buffs on these. Okay, if you look at Zachary Taylor, for example, his main skill, in-city range attack, 50%. That's big, okay? That's very decent. The issue with wall generals is as you start to go through their stats, you will notice that the stats will get spread out for the other troop types a bit. So, if we look at his ascension, for example, Zachary Taylor is a range-based wall general. Look at his first ascension. In-city mounted troop and ground troop defense and HP. That right there is the issue with wall generals. You get to a certain point where their stats start getting spread out. Okay, so with that, you know the characteristics of each of the three different classes of generals that we're going to be looking at. Right, now with all of that said and done, here are the three generals that we have for range troops, and these are their stats. As you can see clearly, the Class B general, when leading the army general, has the highest stats of the three, followed by the Class C wall general, and then we have the Class A when leading to attack generals. So, there you have it, guys. Aka's pick for the best range general for reinforcing is Louis IX. Okay, now let's move on to ground troops. And we start with the Class A general when leading the army to attack general. And there are quite a few generals to pick from here, but my pick for the Class A general is Tortilla. Tortilla is a fairly new general in the game, and he is quite strong. In fact, I have a friend that has switched his general from Elise straight to Tortilla.
Aka.
And he's having a good time.
Aka.
What? What is it, Cookie Monster? I'm doing a video here.
His name is not Tortilla. It's Tortilla.
Oh, that's a bit embarrassing. Okay, so we have Tortilla. Right, that's Class A. For Class B, this one is pretty much of a no-brainer. Forkbeard. There were a few options available, but in my opinion, Forkbeard is the best when leading the Army General for ground. For the Class C, which is War Generals, we have Isaac Brooke. So these are the three generals for reinforcing choices for ground. And these are their stats. Yeah, you might need to take a closer look at this one. Because from what we can see, Isaac Brooke has higher attack and HP than Forkbeard. Forkbeard is beating him out on the defense. So when you look at the numbers and you look at the stats, for me, in my opinion, I'm willing to say that Isaac Brooke is the best reinforcing general for ground. Based on what I'm looking at, that's my opinion. Does that mean that all Class C war generals are better for reinforcing with ground? Not necessarily, particularly because there aren't that many other war generals for ground. Okay, we have Leonidas, we have Yi Sun Sin. Would those be better than, say, Forkbeard or Pyrrhus? I don't think so. But Isaac Brooke is the man for reinforcing with ground. Okay, now let's move to mounted. And of course, when we come to mounted, it's prime time. Okay, so this one, quite a bit of a no-brainer. For Class A, when leading the army to attack generals, we have Napoleon Prime. Okay, for Class B, when leading the army generals, we have Washington Prime. Okay, for Class C, war generals, for mounted, this one, it took a while for me to look at it, but it ended up being a bit of a no-brainer as well. Queen Boudica. So these are the three generals that we have for mounted, and here are their stats. And when you look at the stats, I think it is safe to say that Washington Prime is the best general to use for mounted troops when reinforcing keeps. Okay, so that's that. Then we move to siege. And for the siege one, this is a little bit interesting. Okay, so the general that we have for the Class A when leading the army to attack general is Gunther. Okay, so he's good there for Class A. For Class B, the two main options that I looked at other generals, but these were the two main ones. And those were Edward Teach and Melisande. Now, ideally, I would have gone with Melisande on this one. But I know for a fact that very few people have Melisande. So putting her there is kind of like a moot option. Because of that, I ended up going with Edward Teach. As a point to note, I also considered Raimundo as part of this, but I ended up going with Teach. Okay, for the Class C, War General. Again, for this one, two main options were Takenaka and Leo III. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. I can say categorically that Takenaka is the best war general for siege in the game. However, I think you will be out of your mind if you wanted to use Takenaka specifically for reinforcing. You paid a lot of money to get the general. You're not just going to put him on the sideline specifically for reinforcing. On the other hand, Leo III, a lot of people have Leo, a lot of people have extra copies of him, and more importantly, he is a decent general for siege. So, my pick here is Leo III. Now, we put the three generals there, and we compare their stats. And as you can see, Teach ends up having the highest stats of the three of them. So, Aka's pick for best siege general for reinforcing keeps is Edward Teach. Now that we have gone through the four troop types, what can we conclude from this? First of all, there is a general tendency that when leading the army generals are the best for reinforcing. It's not always the case, but it's the case in most situations. The next best class of generals to use for reinforcing is war generals. And then followed by when leading the army to attack generals. So that's the first thing. The second thing that we can say is that For the Class A, when leading the army to attack generals, even though that throughout this analysis, that class of generals was consistently the lowest out of the three, it does not mean that they are particularly useless for reinforcing. Because what we have gone through here illustrates the maximum difference in the buffs that you will get for the different classes. Everything else that you have is going to work even if you have a Class A when leading the army to attack general. Your gear is going to work, refines are going to work, your research is going to work, dragon talents, monarch gear, all the other stuff is going to work except for this difference in buffs that we have shown here. So if you have a when leading the army to attack general, you can still confidently send them out for reinforcing. Okay, now with that being said, these are Aka's best picks for the top reinforcing generals in the game. You might prefer different generals, or you might think that some others are better. That's perfectly fine. We can discuss that in the comments, no problem. Now, when you look at these generals, the next thing that you're going to want to naturally ask is, so what are good assistants for them? Now, I don't want to get into the weeds of talking about who is compatible with who and who is not compatible. Let's save ourselves all that trouble. Whichever general that you pick for your main reinforcing general, pick a general from a different class. And that's it. My recommendation would be, if you have a Class B when leading the army general, then it might be best for you to pair them with a Class C wall general. If you can't, pair them with a Class A. That's a simple recommendation. If you want to go a bit deeper into it and put some effort into looking for the best assistant general for your reinforcing general, then you can check out this video here where we go through all the key steps that you need for picking the best assistant for your general. That's it for me, guys. Thank you very much. Aka signing out.